Hello and welcome to the Chat Show. I am General Buckles and I am joined by my esteemed colleague Bradford Skeldorado of the YouTube channel Bradford Skeldorado. Bradford, how are you tonight?
Doing incredible, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. On tonight's show, we are going to chat about tech team-ups, innovations that we should have seen coming, and later we're going to take a look at the 1995 cyberpunk film Johnny Mnemonic. We'll examine its relationship with reality, its place in tech history, and what, if any, influence it had on the real technologies that followed. For our first tech story of the evening, we've got a luxury brand that has decided to weigh into our tech world a little bit. So let's take a look at that. All right. Lamborghini just made a PC case with lianli, and it looks amazing. That is the headline. That is not necessarily our opinion. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just I want to let Brad speak for himself. This was your find. You're a big fan of Ben Hardwidge, the author of this article, I understand.
I just know that both articles actually come from Ben Hardwidge this week, but just wanted to say, super popular car company meets very popular computer case company. Very cool design, very popular with the open glass and everything. So they decided to collaborate and make the 𝐂𝐻𝐿 Dynamic a Lamborghini themed PC case. So as we can see, it does have some added features than the normal 𝐂𝐿 Dynamic had. A little bit of RGB, but it also has this this LCD display that's in the back. I don't know if we got a scroll down for a picture of that.
There's a close up. Yeah, right here. It's inside the case in the back. You can see there.
Yeah, it's along the back wall. Display your temperatures and had that nice Lamborghini look to it. Does have some nice carbon fiber feet. The yellow striping around the exterior, the corners of it. But
you're a fan of that,
what are your
right?
thoughts on? So I will say, being strictly down to one color, I would say that as not being the most versatile look to it. But like I said, it is a very good looking case.
I think Lamborghini and Ferrari, these luxury car brands, they are very particular about how their cars look. I think, didn't they go after some influencer or somebody for painting their Ferrari or wrapping their Ferrari in an unsanctioned color? Like they get litigious about those things. So, yeah, my thoughts are, I love the idea of the collab. I think the modern case design limits you in what you can do with the case. Older cases, and I should have had some images ready. If you think back to some of the case designs, I guess like between 2000 and now, there was a lot more body work and less glass. So you could do more with design elements, and you're very limited if you want to have it be what appears to be roughly 30-40% glass. You don't have much else to work with, and you slap a logo on there, a little bit of trim color, and make the rest out of carbon fiber. Voila! It's lit. The screen is a nice touch, but they had to put it inside because there's nowhere else to put it.
Yeah. So as far as marketing this as the Lamborghini, you've got the logo in the front, and realistically, if you think about, because I was looking at it at first, I was thinking $299 is expensive for a case, especially one like the 𝐂𝐿 Dynamic that has been around for. I don't know when it came out originally, but I would say probably the last 4 or 5 years. These cases have been very popular, but I think it's about $150 more than what you can get one brand new. But when you factor in the LCD display that comes in the back and just the color option, I wouldn't say it's really out of the realm of being too costly by having that Lamborghini name. I personally don't think Lamborghini's benefiting anything from relying on these PC case sales, especially since I believe they're only selling just under 6,500 units. So you sell one car, you're probably making up your amount that you've got invested in this as far as the collaboration itself.
6,498 units, which is the same number as the cylinder capacity on several Lamborghini cars. Like that's a weird detail that PC enthusiasts aren't going to care about if they're not, a rev head, as the article here implies. Overall, I think it's neat. What did they say the cost was? Did they?
I believe it's $299.
Oh, yeah. No. I don't think I'd spring for that. But to each their own. Go for it if you like it. This does bring to question. All right, it's an interesting collaboration. It's not out of the norm to see crossover, different industries collabing on things to try to cross market to various demographics. But this got us talking about what other collaborations, one, have we seen that we thought were good or bad, and two, what collaborations haven't we seen that we would want to see? What were some of yours?
I would just say the collaborations that normally come to mind are anything that are going to be if you're trying to market something through a company, with a big name brand and a small name brand is what you would typically shoot for, but something that has done very well. We talked about it the other night with Nike and Apple Watch having the tracking, the running, you've got all the Nike features. So you've got two big brands that kind of come together with something like that. But I think we were more focused on the odd collaborations that we saw that were strange, and the potential for your kitchen appliances that kind of work with fitness companies that we were kind of joking about.
No.
I guess we
were joking, and then I looked it up, and here it is. Like, there are these weird collaborations. Beko home appliances with some gaming tech icon named Michael Wan, who I've never heard of and haven't bothered to Google since we found it. But that a partnership with his healthy kitchen brand and Beko home appliances, which I think we postulated could devolve into your own kitchen appliances, your microwave, your refrigerator, shaming you into losing weight if you haven't reached the goals that you predetermined. So you open your fridge, or you go to open your fridge to get a snack and you can't because it's locked itself. It's like, nope, you have not done enough steps today to earn opening your fridge.
Or your air fryer incinerating anything you put in it.
Right, yes. Yeah, you put that pizza in your air fryer, and your air fryer's like, no, we're going to burn that to a crisp and you can find something else to eat. That'd be nuts. One collab that we thought of that I think would be fantastic, and this is getting real conceptual here, was Nintendo getting into the PC space, because we were kind of going off this, what other brands would we like to see that could collab with a PC case maker? But Nintendo could do it, but then they'd have to go a step further. They haven't put out a console since the Switch came out, right?
Which is primarily, I would say, targeted to handheld, and they've got the dock for it.
Right.
But I think where we were going toward was, how does Nintendo combat emulators and create their own PC that would have the ability to play console games and have its own built-in emulator? Right. So there is a lot of talk lately about emulators being kind of squashed and these brands trying to protect their IP, but they're also not doing anything with their IP, I don't think. Nintendo should be the maintaining and curating this catalog of nostalgia that they could be marketing and selling some kind of Game Pass access to. But if they were to get into the PC space, they could release a computer, and this is AI generated, this one here. This is something that we asked Bing's AI to put together for us.
And imagine if you had your Switch and you could dock it in with your PC, play your Switch games on your PC, also access Nintendo's curated network of or catalog of games, and play all of them. Plug in various controllers. It's a PC, but it's a gaming console. But they could exist in that space in between, because I'm sure there's a lot of people right now. And I know I was this way about 2 years ago. No, 2020, 5 years ago. I was on the fence about wanting to, what was I going to play F1 on? Because that's what I was getting into, sim racing, right? Was I going to build a PC or just get an Xbox? And that's how I was going to do sim racing. I ultimately went with an Xbox, and then eventually built a PC. But there's people that are flip-flopping there. Get those people by creating something that lives in between those spaces. That's my idea.
And I think whenever you mention the emulator space and them combating that, I don't think Nintendo is concerned about combating emulator sites and that intellectual property. Now it's gone more toward new games and big time streamers or content creators that use Nintendo's products. So they go in and reach into that streamer or content creator's pocket and say, since you use Nintendo products, we want our cut. And at first, when I heard about that, I thought that was bizarre. Like, how could Nintendo bully somebody into paying up? But absolutely, after I did a little research, Nintendo can come after you for making a Mario speedrun video if you are a content creator. So I think that maybe they're not concerned as much with you downloading, Duck Hunt or Super Mario. But if you were to make $1 million off of the content, then I could see them coming after you and saying, hey, we want our cut.
Yeah. As Nintendo cracks down on emulation, one dares to stick around on iOS store. So I guess Nintendo's been on this tear trying to get all these emulators shut down. And someone on a hosting app called Delta is still on the iOS store as of April 21st when this article came out. Yeah, to combat, if Nintendo doesn't like emulators, just be the premier emulator provider.
Yeah.
And provide it everywhere. No one's, like, they're not making any new money on the original NES. If that, they could be if they wanted to, I guess. But
yeah, and I didn't know this, but the Switch actually has an entire library when you have the online Nintendo whatever online thing, to where it's like 200 games that are Nintendo, Super Nintendo, what was it, GameCube. So they have their own like limited library of games anyways. That you can already access and play.
That's all I'm saying. That's what I've been saying since the beginning, is that's what they should be, the place that you go. You just got to make it accessible and affordable. If it's only on Switch, then you're being forced to buy their hardware. I'd pay, if I wanted to. If I wanted this product, I don't. But if someone wanted it, they'd pay $10 for the app in the Microsoft Store or where on Steam or something for the Ultimate Nintendo, vintage emulator or whatever.
Yeah. Well, like we've mentioned before, you don't make money off the emulated games. You make money off the monthly subscription that people pay for the first 2 months and then forget about it for the rest of the year. Yeah. So that's where you make your money. $10 a month, you make $120 out of the year, and they played Super Mario World for a total of 3 hours.
Yep. But that is
cool
our first story on collabs and its effects on the other brands. For our second story, we have something new coming from AMD that we already kind of knew was coming, but is, I guess, more confirmed than it was previously.
Yeah, so another article by Ben Hardwich, and so we didn't set this up, but we found two that are really good and really interesting. So with Computex just behind us, this was something that I believe AMD was going to announce their new RDNA 4, but they actually have kind of postponed that for this new potential GPU design. So if you've been into PC gaming for any amount of time, I'm sure a lot of people remember the SLI, that you would take 2 GPUs, 3 GPUs, 4 GPUs, and connect them all, that each GPU had a single die in it. So this is a concept where it takes 1 GPU and incorporates multiple smaller dies to make a more powerful product.
It seems like a no-brainer, and I'm, you know, a novice, or I have no expertise in this area, chip making and whatnot, but it would seem like a no-brainer that you would just pair up multiple little chiplets, as they're calling them, to get the same result of performance on the back end. What this article doesn't seem to really talk about is what's the efficiency of communication between the chiplets, because I imagine that's why, you know, a single die can be as powerful as it is. Everything's happening in one space, but now these things have to communicate with each other. It's a monolithic die versus the monolithic die. So the SLI connection had to be so fast and so efficient. This is sort of internal SLI connections, and it's got to be much smaller. They don't really get into that, into like, all right, is there anything different about that?
So I think this will be kind of a more to come. They did mention that they've got a patent for it. So this is something that's kind of on the horizon that they're testing. But kind of what you mentioned, the smaller chiplets versus a monolithic chip, a die, would be the efficiency and the price that you could potentially do to have a more affordable, smaller GPU with multiple dies versus a large flagship GPU that's $1,500 that someone may not be able to afford, that has 1 die on it. So you could incorporate a wider range of models with just adding the same you know, I guess model series, but different levels of dies that you could add to it. And it would keep the cost down in that regard.
Yeah, it just seems, like I said, it seems like a no-brainer. There's a little schematic they have of it, breaking up the different function shaders. Well, let me click on this. Can I open this in a new tab? There we go. No, I can't. Oh, there we go. Front end, mode selector, multimedia die. Yeah, it's I'm just surprised this is something that had to be patented. I would have thought this would have been the next step. Once they hit a certain point in GPU making, they're like, you know what, just add a second one next to it. Or, you know, I thought this would be a step that would have been bypassed by now, and they would have been on to something else. So good on them.
I'm curious to know if this is one of those cases where you're so tunnel vision on making bigger dies, bigger and better performance, that the guy in the back's like, hey, why don't we just add 2 small dies? And it was like, it's the meme of they throw the guy out the window, you know, and then it ends up being like, well, maybe he was onto something.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, keep an eye out on them, because I've never really considered switching off NVIDIA, but if this comes out and you can get 4080 power for half the price, and because they say that they're going to use this particular technology to focus on the mid-range, which I like that they're calling 4080 mid-range. I always considered like 6070 was mid-range and the 3050s were the low end, or 4050s, whatever. Yeah, they're going with it. So they also have the 9000 series dropping this year, which I think they do have this innovation that's kind of always around the corner, and it keeps getting overshadowed by the hype around a 3090 or a 4090 or a 5090. That hype keeps overshadowing what they can do, but their market share has gone up, hasn't it?
Or AMD?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it lately. I know that NVIDIA, I just seen a headline today that NVIDIA stock has finally corrected itself. But
Was
yeah,
it
as far as-
incorrect?
NVIDIA actually overtook Microsoft last week.
Oh, okay.
Microsoft has the leading, I guess, stock at the time, for the longest time. NVIDIA actually had overtaken it.
Yeah, stocks are a tough topic right now. I'm not doing so well with a bet that I made.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ugly. So, not computer related. That's where I should have been. I should have been focused on the computer space. So, all right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. And that covers our tech news for the evening. For our next segment, we have a first for us, but hopefully not the last. We have decided to take a look at the 1995, dare I call it a classic film?
I don't know if I'd call it a classic, but definitely interesting at the time that it was produced.
I'll give you that. It's the film Johnny Mnemonic starring Keanu Reeves in the year 1995. Give me just 1 second. I want to duplicate this. There we go. Boom. All right. So Johnny Mnemonic, and I forget how this even came up, how we even decided to do this, but there's a slew of tech movies out there, and movies that focus on computer technologies, movies that allude to it or use it as sort of a backbone, movies that time travel and they predict future technologies, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong, sometimes they're just absolutely absurd. And Johnny Mnemonic, I don't know if it was the first, but it was definitely, I think, a key film in the cyberpunk genre, which Keanu Reeves has a long-standing relationship with. It was released on April 15th, 1995, directed by a gentleman named Robert Longo, who I will rant and rave about later on. Screenplay was by a gentleman named William Gibson, not the Gibson who is famous for computers. The plot of the movie is in the year 2021. Actually, hold on. Let me let someone else tell you all about that.
The year is 2021. It is no longer safe to transmit information. Phones, computers, and satellites are all vulnerable, but there is a solution.
Your storage capacity? I can
Keanu
carry
Reeves.
80 gigs of data in my head.
Input the data into the brain of a human courier, like Johnny Mnemonic.
Hit me.
Okay. So, first off, this is also the first time we're seeing, but not the last, that we're seeing someone stick something in the back of Keanu Reeves' head to hook him up to a computer.
Yeah.
The year 2021, society is driven by a virtual internet, which has created a degenerate effect called nerve attenuation syndrome, or NAS. Megacorporations control much of the world, intensifying class hostility already created by NAS. Johnny is a mnemonic courier who discreetly transports sensitive data for corporations in a storage device implanted in his brain. I can test that. At the cost of his childhood memories, which they don't mention till later. So that's the basic plot of this film. But before we get into our personal views on the film and our critiques of it, let's tell you what was actually happening in the world in 1995, in the world of tech, when this movie came out. Yahoo.com and eBay.com both got registered in 1995. The MP3 format was just decided on and started being used. Command and Conquer was first released by Westwood Studios. Microsoft was releasing its second version of Internet Explorer. The first computer network wiretap was authorized, I presume, by the FBI, and led to the arrest of someone named Julio Cesar Ardita. Don't know much about him. And directly relating to this movie, the first SSD was developed in 1991, but it was not flash-based. Flash-based SSDs were first introduced in 1995. So this is a big year for tech movies and real tech. What do you remember about 1995? Were you using computers? Were you aware of any what was
No.
what was your awareness level of any of this?
I was playing Super Nintendo and skateboarding every day. Like that was it. I think 95, I was 8 years old. So yeah, I mean, cartoons and snacks after school, you know.
You were 8?
And, yeah.
Oh. Okay. All right. I got a few years on you. 1995,
Yeah.
I was just leaving middle school, going into high school.
Okay.
When this movie had come out. And the internet, do you remember when the internet was first shown to you? Like when you first was like, hey, someone like showed you a laptop or a computer and said, here's the internet. Like what?
It would have been in school, because small town in Arkansas, my family, we didn't have an actual computer until like 2001. So like it was a while before we jumped on the PC bandwagon, before it all took off.
I remember my uncle showing me Netscape, which I don't know if you know what that is. But he was showing me Netscape, and I was like, I don't understand what the internet is. I don't like, what do you mean there's information? What can I do with this? But I wasn't alone. The rest of the world at that time was kind of unsure about it. One of the big things was there's this article by one of the pioneers, Clifford Stoll. He's a 44-year-old author, astronomer, and computer security expert. He was using the internet way back in 1974 when it was called ARPANET. He wrote this whole article and did this interview talking about how he doesn't think the internet's going to amount to anything for society. He says, the information highway is being sold to us as delivering information, but what it's really delivering is data, numbers, bits, bytes, but damned little information. Unlike data, information has utility, timelessness, accuracy, and pedigree. Information I can trust, but data coming across America Online or CompuServe or whatever, nobody stands behind it. Is the author or medical doctor or some bozo? I don't know. They're behind some screen name anyway. Might be an 11-year-old girl or a 70-year-old wizened philosopher. What's missing is anyone who will say, hey, this is no good. He's wrong. People have opinions on the internet. He basically thought the internet was going to devolve into a crowd of people screaming at each other. Is he wrong?
He's not wrong. I mean, I'll have to share it with you if you hadn't seen it, but I don't know if you've seen the video of the guy that has like 4 laptops and he's got different Facebook profiles, and he just goes on to, and it's like a whole funny skit, but he's like, yeah, man, this is all I do is I fill my whole time with just going on people's posts and just starting drama. And it's like reading an article from some lady that's an astrophysicist, and he's like, you're all wrong. You don't understand what you're talking about. And then watch the comments flow through. But he's like, yeah, so it's pretty entertaining. But really, that's what the internet is, because I can say whatever I want to you without any repercussions, because I'm 1,000 miles away.
Yeah. What was actually going on the internet at the time? What was being used for? Terror in Oklahoma, the internet, talk on bombs, surges on the computer network. The computer network they're referring to is the internet in this article. I guess is following the Oklahoma City bombing, the federal building there. There was a huge uptick mid-90s with militia groups and stuff like that, and they were all over the internet using that to hand out instruction guides to how to make your own fuel oil bomb and things like that. So there's a pretty bleak outlook on what the internet was going to eventually turn into, which I think might have fed some people's interpretation of what, you know, what got into this movie, this film, this thing we watched. So that's, in terms of influence, I think this movie really does capture everyone's mindset at that time. But as far as, as part of as mindsets go, you hadn't seen this movie previously. I don't think I'd ever seen it either. I feel like I would have remembered it.
No,
Let's talk.
You know what I just realized?
What?
So you mentioned the article, or the movie come out April 15th.
Yeah.
The article was April 30th. So 15 days later, this guy publishes this article talking about. So, and I didn't realize the correlation. At first, I was thinking like, this guy could have written this in any time of the year, but the fact that it was 2 weeks after the movie come out is. I wonder
And
if
remember,
there's a coincidence.
1995 had Hackers, The Net with Sandra Bullock. Like, this was a year riddled with this stuff. So, it was ever present in everyone's minds. I think it was just sort of a big year in general for this topic. But you hadn't seen it. I'm pretty sure I hadn't seen it. What were your thoughts?
So some of the things that I took away was this was a very early look at what the potential for AI would have been. You've got the talking blue face, the lady that was since deceased, and she was the in and of itself the computer interface that was talking and giving the input to the actual humans, saying this was good or bad, what to do, what not to do with Johnny Mnemonic, and how this is going to affect you. So early on, look at AI and kind of, you know, what are the dangers, because it doesn't really go into a lot of that. Another thing is implantable tech. Like you mentioned, it was the jack in the back of his head that could install the information into his brain. Very early on in the movie, it talks about do not overload your brain. He can carry up to 80 gigs. He puts a doubler on it to 160, and they upload him with 320. So the concern is for him to hurry up and unload this data before it either causes his head to explode. But not only that, like you mentioned, he had deleted all of his childhood memories in order to store more space because he was an international courier. One of the interesting things is the graphic you brought up but a couple weeks ago with the hard drive, 1995, the cost of a 1 terabyte would have been, I think it was at $323,000. So his 320 gigs would have been worth approximately $116,224.
Yeah,
so
I did the math on that too.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think that, like, okay, I could see where you could make some good money, but your whole thing is to not lose your head and to make it to your destination, to unload the content.
But remember, this is 2021 in the film. So what was the real cost of a gig of storage in 2021? And by the way, the cost that you're talking about is hard drive, spinning disk, optical drive, not flash. And the reason I brought up the flash drive earlier actually being invented or being sold in 1995, in the film, the implication seems to be that they call it wet wired. He's wet wired, and the device in his head is the interface, right? Like an HDMI jack or a USB jack. But what's really holding the data is his actual brain. His brain is holding the data, right? So it's in his gray matter, and that's why it can't be overloaded, because he only has so much space, I guess. And they do that scan, and it detects the device that I guess they referred to as an ocular or a cochlear implant or something. But his brain is holding the data. Now, why wouldn't they just? It's an innovative idea, but the writer should, if he's kind of plugged into tech at the time, would have known about solid state drives, would have known about flash drives. And they could have just been implanted a flash drive so that it wouldn't affect his brain. It wouldn't be dangerous. But you need an element of danger. You need an element of risk involved with the story. So using the brain, I thought, was an interesting concept to store the data at that time. But it was interesting that while they're imagining a lot in the future, they didn't really imagine much in the way of wireless, like wireless transfers or Bluetooth or anything like that. Everything had to be plugged in with wires. Not very futuristic.
Except for the VR. So the VR internet was another thing that I'd taken notes on. When you're watching the VR internet, he has, what were they called? The data touch gloves.
Oh,
data
I tried.
Gloves, something along those lines?
Well, there was the data gloves, and then the thing over his face, I think he referred to as an iPhone. They were iPhones, and in the subtitles it said EYE, iPhones.
I caught that too.
Right. So basically, they're just the flashiest part of the movie, and the things that they put in all the trailers was really just sort of an early inclination of the metaverse, of putting on a Quest Meta headset and navigating something by hand. And I'm honestly a little surprised that with the controllers that we use today with VR, why they haven't just converted it to gloves, like just slip like the Nintendo Power Glove. Like it seems weird that that's not what we've done actually in the future.
So and I just thought it was funny that you're searching the internet by opening files and that's how his interpretation at the time was. Your VR is going to be, you're locked into this internet world, this interface, and as he's scouring through online, he's actually picking stuff apart, and you see him like opening up, and it's very descriptive on like how he's, traversing the internet that was very new at the time. But this is what they were forecasting for the next 26 years. This is what the future is going to be like.
I think that's comes down to what people like. How do you get the message across to people what the internet is? Typing words, there's always these horrific depictions of hacking where they're typing on a keyboard, but there's no typing on the screen. Images are popping up while they're typing because we're visual people and it's a visual medium, movies are. So if you're going to depict the internet in a way, make it something you can actually interact with versus typing, because typing isn't cool. It isn't sleek. If I can touch it and I can move it, then that's neat. And I ultimately think that's why they went that route. But calling it a virtual internet, it was real internet. It was an internet. It was just sort of a VR interface. Now, on the opposite side of this, the faxing was, oddly enough, still a very important technology. They missed the mark on that. It should have been faxing. It should have been transmit or whatever. Like, why was it a fax at the time? Because well, we're still using dial-up at this point in 1995. So I don't think they envisioned what followed it. You got cable internet. DLS. What was the next wave of something with a D? I can't remember now.
I'm trying to think of what it was too.
Right. DSL. Something they got really right. Hand wave faucets. He waves his hand over a faucet, and I'm like, that's perfect, great. The premise of the film, he has to take this technology that he has to take this data that he's uploaded to his brain and get it to Newark, New Jersey, which has become this dystopia. And the two main kind of competing factions are the corporate overlords and then these people called the low-techs who abhor technology. And they end up using like television, CRT televisions, low-tech stuff, VHS, and and that's the technology they're okay with, because I still think it's technology, but older technology, and they're mad at the high-tech evolution because that's what's caused this syndrome, this NAS. But it's all RF signals, all of it, whether it's radio waves, of a ham radio, whether it's television RF signals or it's, Wi-Fi. It's all RF. It's all same, part of all the same spectrum. So I don't know. They don't make it clear what about this newer technology is causing NAS in people. Is it really just the screen thing? Because you only ever see one person with NAS, the main love interest woman of the film. Mm-hmm. And you only ever see one or two uses of this face thing, this virtual interface of the internet, ever. So
well, and you don't realize that she has any issue until about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and then she takes him into the area where they have the black shakes, and the black shakes is the side effect from the NAS, and then she has a big seizure or whatever. And that's when we run into Spider, who has to help him,
who is Henry Rollins.
Out. Yeah. But it is
was this his first acting thing?
I don't know. This is pretty early on, but yeah, I don't know if this would be his first or not.
Let's take a look at his credits here real quick. Go all the way back to the very beginning. Wow. Black Flag, Black Flag, Black Flag. Kiss Napoleon Goodbye, a film in 1990. No, this was definitively not his first film. He did The Chase with Charlie Sheen in 1994. He was in Heat in 95. And Johnny Mnemonic. So, yeah. They do let you know early on that she has NAS, because when she's hassling Ralphie, and you can't forget his name because Johnny likes to say it 5 times every time he does say it, Ralphie, Ralphie, Ralphie. He has her hold out her hand to see if she's steady. That's why he tells her to hold out her hand, because she wants to get a job as a bodyguard, because apparently that's all she's good for. Yeah. So Ralphie's testing her out. And I will say the fashion and makeup of Ralphie's 2 henchwomen was pretty well predictive of the time. Like, if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, the makeup, the contouring makeup and everything, that's actually what you would see scrolling TikTok right now. It was a little extra, but...
And the low-tech look like what you would find at a common day rave.
Yeah,
the black lines across the cheeks, just random black
face
lines.
tattoos. No, those are definitely Post Malone fans. Getting dressed up to go to one of his concerts for sure. So there were parts of that were very well predictive, I think. But going back to Spider, what I thought was weird about him is he very much didn't want Johnny. When Johnny brings, I forget her name already, Jane to Spider's place to get fixed up because she's had a seizure. Spider doesn't want Johnny there. He's like, you should leave. And then he goes back and forth with this. You came to the right place. You shouldn't be here. I'm the only one that can help you. Sorry, I can't get it out of your brain without a drill. Like, he keeps going back and forth on whether or not he can actually help. Yeah. And then after they take him to another location, because his lab isn't good enough, so they go to the hospital, then it's revealed that what's in Johnny's head is the cure for NAS. That's the information he's been traveling with. And if he doesn't get it out of his head, because as you said earlier, he's got 320 gigs, which is double what he can hold, his head will explode or he'll die, or there's seepage. They're very vague about all this seepage, and the data could get corrupted if it stays in his head too long. The reveal that it's NAS and that Spider had been expecting him the whole time, Spider doesn't act at all like he's surprised to have met Johnny, or that he's excited that he's there, or that it's a big deal. He's like, what you have in your head is the cure to NAS. We've been waiting for you. Like, well, then why are you being such a jerk to him? And why are you like...
Not only that, but he takes him to the hospital, and Spider's helping multiple people, and like, here's the files, doctor. And he's like, finally, like, stop. We need to fix this. I need this out of my head. And then he breaks it to him, almost like you said, like nonchalant, walking around. And then it's like, oh, by the way, you've got the cure for what all these people are here for.
Right.
And like the national pandemic of technology. Another thing I like that Spider and Johnny's like, what's the reason for all this? How did we get here? And just the calmness of Spider being like, well, we're here because of consumer this, that, and the other, and everybody just has to have it. But anyways, and it's like, this is a major thing. Consumers are just living for this stuff. But whatever, man. I need you out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And where did he get that lab coat?
When he walks in, they come up the stairs. He takes his jacket off, and I'm like, why in this scene would he randomly just take his jacket off? Is he gonna walk around the corner and just like toss it in the corner? But he walks over, picks up a lab coat, and then puts his jacket on top of all the other lab coats as he puts it on and walks into the hospital. So, yeah, like, not good execution on that.
And then he hooks Johnny up to some machine, because he's already tried this at his place and it didn't work. So he brings him to the hospital, hooks him up to another machine. He's staring at a bunch of oscilloscopes and starts typing while reading oscilloscopes. And he's furiously hacking his brain, and it doesn't seem to be working. By the way, we haven't mentioned the villains, the Yakuza, have been chasing him down, trying to get this data out of his head the whole time, and that's why he's constantly on the run. And they present what I think is some of the worst stuff about this movie, and I don't know if I've made it clear. I thought this was an awful movie. Like, as a movie, it was awfully made. The fight scenes and the special effects were awful. It was whoever had the fight choreography was just awful. The only redeeming thing was this guy had that one of the Yakuza had a thing over his thumb that looked like a big thumbnail, big almost like a claw, and he would pull it out, and it was like a laser whip. It was like this razor wire, but it glowed like a lightsaber, and he used it to slice
slice everything.
And it stood out as like really good special effects over everything else that was awful. I thought it was a weird dichotomy between the two. Like I said, the special effects in the fight scenes, the weird, cars falling, every bit of action was, whoever directed this did not know anything about how to shoot and cut together a fight scene or an action scene. And to talk about who that was, where'd my mouse go? Sorry. The director, Robert Longo. This was, and they used this as a marketing tool, his directorial debut in feature films. Incidentally, it was also his final feature film, his first and only, because he was a longtime music video director. He hadn't done a feature film before. So it looks like that. It looks like an 80s action film, like really bad fight scenes from the 80s, like pre-Die Hard. The writing was all over the place because the writer, William Gibson, was a video game writer. And this was based on a short story. This honestly feels like they took a short story, laid it out into a script, and then tried to cram a bunch of like excuses for action into it. Excuses for him to constantly be on the run. Like going to Spider's place felt like a filler piece before going to the hospital, before going to the Low-Techs, led by J-Bone, played by Ice-T. Ice-T plays J-Bone, the head of the Low-Techs, and they're just sort of a ragtag, homeless-looking crew of people that don't like advanced technology.
Yeah, and I will say one note that I took, and kind of mentioned this the other day, but the movies in the past that were futuristic movies had definitely an abundance of leather, had structures that were seriously deteriorated,
Mhm.
like the bridge that the low
Right.
techs were staying in. But not only that, an over amount of use of old tech piled together to mimic new tech. So it's like the oscilloscope, all the CRT TVs, to where it's like everything is compiled together and glued together, painted one color, and this is the future. And that's
Right.
how a lot of movies, Back to the Future, the car that had all the random stuff just piled on top of it, the DeLorean, and
Mhm.
that was to look like it was futuristic, and that's what is going to take them into the future.
I
The
would argue
Matrix,
that.
the chip.
I would. I have some thoughts on that. We're not going to get into that one, but I see exactly what you're saying. You're right, and that he's a music video director. What do you remember of like Nine Inch Nails, Stabbing Westward, like in the '90s? Those music videos. It was real gritty, sort of just industrial, cobbled together, things, piles of a tower of CRT televisions. Deacon Blue in the chat here points out that the monofilament that they used for that laser whip thing that the guy had was probably the entirety of their CGI budget. I don't even know if it was CGI. Would it have been a computer that did that, or was it just some kind of lighting effect in editing or post-production?
Well, they definitely had some CGI, because the green screen in some sections was very shaky. And that's the
Yes.
thing about older movies like that, is it's like when you're walking and the stars are shaking back and forth, or the water's rippling at an odd, and like the whole thing is moving behind you. Like that's definitely their CGI budget was very minimal.
One of I think the most hilarious and yet slightly redeeming elements of the film was Dolph Lundgren's role as the street Jesus priest, who was really just a hitman that you could for hire, who dressed like Jesus, and it was the most absurd notion of a character, but he was the best acting in the film, I thought. He really embodied that role. And my favorite piece of the movie was his crucifix Rambo knife. He had this knife that was clearly a Rambo knife, but it had Jesus on the cross of the hilt. And
Well, I think when he comes in, originally he's holding the crucifix, and the guy's like, "I've got a job for you," and he's like, and then he grabs it and turns it, and then you see it's a knife.
yeah,
Because at first he's holding it and it looks like, he's talking about, yeah, we have service every day, and it's like, well, I've got a job for you, we're willing to pay however much extra, and then he like grabs it and reveals that it is an actual knife.
yeah. I thought he was brilliant. They do a little fake out at the end, which I also thought was actually brilliant, where they do a fake out after he's killed and he's burnt to a crisp, and he's laying there, and you see him start to move, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is unstoppable. He's like the T-800, or the T-1000, no, 800. That was the robot one. And then it reveals that really it's just people picking up his body to throw it in the trash can. That I thought was legitimately funny, and actually a good choice. I wonder if the director actually came up with that. One piece of tech that they hint at that was predictive of future technology: early deep faking. At one point, one of the Yakuza makes a phone call, and he does this sort of Muppets thing where a laser is looking at his hands, and the character on screen is talking, and he's talking. He's moving his hands to make the lips move, but the character on screen is somebody other than him. That was interesting to choose that as their choice of how deepfaking would work.
Tech that was like that we kind of skipped over talking about the virtual internet, that I thought was interesting, was whenever the virus was implemented,
Yeah.
you actually see him get hit with the virus, and it's the haptic feedback. that they're implementing in games today with VR. So it's like the virtual internet is a way of, like we talked about, him opening and stuff. If you had a virus just get implemented, it would just screen would go black. You don't see anything else. But since he's in the computer, it's a physical virus that he is coming into interaction with. So I think that's kind of the way that they're trying to make it a little bit more dramatic of send the virus after him.
Right. And there's a theme throughout the whole film that somehow the data going into your brain is a two-part kind of function. You have to wear these things and you're getting a visual input as well as you have the thing plugged in the back of your head. And it seems that their thought process was that in order to imprint memories in your brain, you have to see some things as well as just have the data. And 4 years later, 1999, when The Matrix comes out, it's just, no, you plug in the back of your head and everything goes through your brain. Like, you don't need visual input. And that idea that the virus gets into you, I thought that they're raising the stakes and making it risky to do this, but it's a silly notion that a computer virus is going to get into your body through your eyeballs.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned it on here to where it's whenever the Robo Dolphin, Jones,
don't even.
Jones,
okay.
ends up whenever he has to get rid of the virus. What was it that he says?
Don't skip over this. Hold on. Let's set the darn scene here. The low-techs have someone named Jones who is their head hacker, and you get into the low-techs headquarters, and it's a Navy Dolphin that's in a tank that hasn't been cleaned in years. That tank was dirty, and he's hooked up to all these electronics, and he's the hacker. And so when they plug Johnny into their low-tech version, by the way, these low-techs can somehow access high-tech stuff pretty well.
Loop it. That's what it was.
What is loop it? Johnny just keeps saying loop it, and the dolphin is hacking his brain, and you see this virtual dolphin swimming around the VR internet as it attacks the virus, and so there's this fight between a virtual dolphin
and like a stick Johnny. It's
a stick figure Johnny.
It's like they're trying to project his face on a cylinder, but yeah, it's very bad.
Once they got the dolphin in, once you saw a dolphin in the tank, you're like, oh, you guys have gone, you've jumped the dolphin, like jumping the shark. You've jumped the dolphin. It was oh man, this today would be a straight to DVD film, and if it didn't have Keanu Reeves in it at the time, I think it would have been.
I think this would have been like a Tubi.
Yeah,
I don't think this would have made Amazon. This wouldn't have made Netflix. This would have been Freevee or whatever they call the free platform that you can upload your low budget movies on.
Right. It did make $19 million at the box office.
And it cost all of $130,000 to make the entire movie.
Did it?
I don't know. I'm just saying it couldn't have been. And Keanu Reeves and Dolph Lundgren, I'm sure, were the two most expensive. Ice-T would have been a big budget, but it's one of those, like, the 90s. How much could it have cost to make a film like this?
I'll tell you, it was $26 million.
Oh, so they did take a loss?
They took a $7 million loss on it. Now, I don't know if that's global or if over time they made it back. A lot of these films will do that over time. It has become this cult classic, but it got pretty mixed reviews at the time. It didn't do well. It's got a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes now, but again, I don't know how that relates to what it was like at the time. And there was a redeeming scene that I want to play that I thought really encapsulated my feelings at the time while watching this film.
What the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on? You know, all my life, I've been careful to stay in my own corner. Looking out for number one, no complications. Now suddenly, I'm responsible for the entire fucking world. And everybody and his mother is trying to kill me if my head doesn't blow up first.
Maybe it's not just about you anymore.
He captures my sentiments at the time was, what the F is going on? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's what I've been saying for the last hour at that point. But also, I believe that this is the first depiction of Gen Z, or at least what people... There was a lot of talk in the last decade of both millennials and Gen Z having this sort of entitled, the world revolves around me attitude. But I honestly think every youthful generation gets that label. But yeah, I've watched a lot of 80s films, and this had the feel of someone who hadn't grasped filmmaking and cobbled together shots in that way. As well as the storytelling. Like, they just kept coming up with excuses to push him from one location to the next because he's on the run and his brain might explode. But when? There's no metric for that. Like, I couldn't figure out how close to his brain exploding we are. And so there's no real stakes because you imagine he's not going to have his head explode. They did somehow finagle a kiss in. They couldn't get a whole sex scene in, but they got a kiss. And that felt very sort of forced, but yeah. Oh, street preacher gets crucified by Robo-Dolphin. Like, you saw that coming. I thought that was a wonderful ending to him. And the AI lady you talk about, I have a note here saying that she just loves the monologue. She just likes to talk.
Yeah, I mean, well, kind of reminding the original, I guess, guy that was trying to get the information that this was, he needed to let his daughter's memory die in whatever setting that he was trying to get this NAS cure this information, that he needed to let her go. Losing a child is hard, but he needs to let this go.
Yeah, there's a lot of like this heartfelt backstory stuff they really weren't able to touch on well. They didn't do a lot of, they didn't introduce you to characters and give you backstory in a way that, you know, would have made sense. And I still don't understand what about this virtual internet that was causing NAS. Like, there's not a lot of explanation that they gave. And when the story isn't unfolding in a sensible way, you need to give you something. You're not telling a story well, and you're not giving, you know, exposition or backstory well. You're leaving the viewer just kind of repeating what's happening on screen, going, what the F is going on? Or in the case of our commenter there, loop it, loop it.
Loop it.
What does that mean? So yeah, overall, I scored this movie, as far as tech accuracy, I gave it a 2 out of 5, because there were some elements that were accurate for the time. Movie quality, I gave it an F. And its predictive influence on, or its predictive abilities or influence on future tech, I gave it a red, going with red, yellow, green scale of how well it was. I still gave it a red, even though it did nail the wave your hand over the faucet thing. I thought that was good. But using fax technology still, the fact that their video calls the quality was garbage, that always seems to be something that they do in these movies, is that in the future they still think they're using, like, you know, really poor quality VHS video calling when they could have used something a little better, you know, on screen. And I guess I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. They did predict the metaverse a little bit. So I don't know. What were your thoughts? You
my
hadn't seen this
rating,
film.
my rating was slightly higher.
Okay.
Just because I feel like 1995, it's like if me and you were to say, cool, 26 years from now, what's tech going to be? And we know that AI is going, we know that all this stuff is kind of going in a direction, but we would be way off, I'm sure, even for the next 5 years, as fast as some tech is, expanding right now. So I think I gave it a 3 for accuracy, because I do feel like they did have some accuracy with what they had at the time. I gave it a what was it, a D for movie quality, because it was pretty bad, but once again, 1995. My thing is not bottom of the barrel, but if you look at 1997, when Men in Black came out with that tech and the goofy guns, and like I said, kind of the same thing, super high quality, versus what we have here. But gave it a D for quality. I would watch it again if I got bored, and it's free on Amazon Prime. And it may be one of those like just for old time's sake. But and then for predictive and influence, I gave it a yellow, just because I feel like the VR, the AI, and to think that we aren't having the black shakes now. Go find any 6-year-old, 7-year-old out in the wild, right, and take their iPad away and see the black shakes in real time.
So the black shakes are actually depression and ADHD. Is that, you're saying that that's how it's manifested?
I mean, kill a cell tower in a location and watch people freak out because they have to talk to somebody. So like, yeah, I would say, like I said, it's a little, like, not to say that's what the black shakes were, but at the time, predictive influence, I think that they did a little bit better if I look at it from a little, from standing in their shoes in 1995.
On a distant.
On that topic, the Los Angeles School District just banned the use of cell phones and social media by students.
Nice.
Don't know how they're going to enforce it. That's one of the big concerns, but in a vote, 5-2 on the LA Board of Education, they're approving that resolution within 120 days from now to ban the student use of cell phones and social media platforms during the entire school day. So we will see what that, what becomes of that. So you haven't seen the film Hackers, have you?
Not yet. But
okay.
Funny that you mentioned that, because it did come up whenever the credits started rolling for Johnny Mnemonic. Hackers come up as a suggested film.
All right, that's not going to be the next one we do, because it's the same year. I think if we do another one, we should jump to like the 80s or even something more recent. We'll jump to a different time period, because I do like focusing on like what's going on in the world of tech at that time, and jump around a bit. But we will get to Hackers, and I would love to see your kind of what you think of Johnny Mnemonic compared to Hackers, which came out the same year. In terms of just movie structure and pacing and how it's shot and how action scenes are shot and the acting and directing. Like there's a massive gulf between the two, I think, in quality there. So we'll see. But that concludes our evening on the chat show. Thank you so much for all of you who tuned in. Hope you enjoyed our take on Johnny Mnemonic, as well as our looks at what's coming up in the world of the PCs and tech news. So any final words there, Bradford?
No, just want to hit on the whole cyberpunk comment. We did mention this, that is Johnny Mnemonic the Johnny Silverhand that Keanu filled in for, and they modeled the character after. So maybe we can look at video game tech and what we're at now. So 90s video game, tech inside of video games, and see how they relate now. But yeah, well, Johnny Silverhand, then you had Keanu in The Matrix, so like he's definitely been a huge one as far as futuristic films. So
Yeah,
But thanks
I don't
everybody
know.
for watching. We greatly appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Man, you're making me think. All right. Yes, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.